Former President Trump has arrived in Milwaukee for the Republican National Convention just a day after he was targeted in an attempted assassination. Joining us for more on this right now is Stef Kight, political reporter at Axios. And Steph, we were just talking with Dave McCormick about the questions around the inadequacy of the protection provided by the Secret Service here. There are questions that are being raised in Washington right now, and you've been tracking that down. What's the latest?
Well, we have already heard from several congressional committee chairs who plan to investigate how this happened, asking questions of the Department of Homeland Security, of Secret Service, of the FBI, trying to figure out whether there were decisions made that led to this horrible instance. And we know that there are at least 3 House committee chairs that are looking into this in their own separate ways. The House Intelligence Committee, the House Homeland Security Committee, as well as the House Oversight Committee. And we also, on the Senate side as well, we know that the Democrat-led Senate Homeland Security Committee is also beginning to look into this. We know that these chairs, leaders of these committees, have begun to get briefings from the U.S. government on what went down there. They're continuing to ask questions. And in the coming days, we expect there to be even more briefings with more members who sit on these panels as they start to dig into what went wrong here.
There have been allegations made, including by Republican congressional leaders who have said, or at least a congressman, Mike Waltz, who said that they had denied repeated requests to increase Trump's Secret Service protection. Is that true?
Well, we've heard from Secret Service, who has said that this is absolutely false, that there was no such request. That is one of the lines of inquiry that we expect lawmakers to be making, whether there was any discussion around, adding additional security measures that was denied. At this point, it does not seem to be the case. We have no information, and that seems to indicate that there was any kind of formal request for additional help that was denied. But we know that this will be one avenue that Republicans in particular are going to go down, and just to see whether this was something that could have been helped.
It's kind of hard to argue, though, when you have a rooftop that is, 400 feet from where the president's standing. That is pretty shocking to think that it wasn't checked out or that it was left to local officials.
It is. I think we're all still reeling by what just happened. And you look at the map and it seems incredible that there wouldn't have been security at that building, which had a clear shot of the stage, clearly. And it is quite disconcerting. And I've spoken to people who are, heading here or here in Milwaukee for the RNC now, who are, even more concerned that there needs to be real security efforts taken to ensure the safety of all the high profile people and national leaders who are coming into Milwaukee for this week. So we know these questions are going to be asked. This was something that never is supposed to happen. And we know that they're going to do what they can to figure out what went wrong. And, we've seen the reports that there were some people in the crowd who maybe saw what was happening and tried to get the attention of security. And that's, of course, concerning as well. But we know that there is going to be a lot coming out of this. It's an incredibly serious situation, and one that lawmakers and the U.S. government are not going to brush aside.
We've also heard President Biden, but more importantly, President Trump is preaching kind of a message of unity. It's the attacked party that really holds the upper hand in this. If President Trump says that he wants to move forward in this way, that's a pretty powerful statement. He's the one who was shot. What does that mean potentially in terms of maybe bringing down the political heat in this country? It's a tall task. A recent Pew study was taken out that said nearly 2/3 of the people in each party thinks that those in the other party are immoral, dishonest, and closed-minded. That is a very difficult wedge to overcome.
Yeah, we have seen polarization and political heat rise over the past several years for a long time. It's something that Axios and many media companies have been covering and trying to warn people about. And it is a part of what's led to where we are right now. And Trump's approach is going to be so critical. And he has indicated that he is a changed man, that this is something that he is going to use to turn toward more of a unifying kind of platform form as we head towards November. Of course, Trump has not always been willing to take that kind of a road, but it has been clear by his Truth Social posts and what we've heard so far as he's spoken to some reporters is that he does see this as a moment for him to lower the temperature, to try to unite his party and unite the country. And we know that he has said that he's made changes to his big speech for the RNC, that it was going to be more of an attacking speech on Biden, going after policy differences, but that because of his near-death experience over the weekend, he has changed what he plans to say to the Republican convention, a time that everyone will be watching what he says. And so Thursday night is going to be a huge moment moving forward.